It looks like another true freshman is set to step up at wide receiver.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Lars, we've got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers out there today, but just a quick reminder, we've got lots of fun shows. So please, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the program out a lot. Like I said, really fun show. We're going to give out some grades to the defense as a whole, talk about some of the highs, some of the lows. We'll get into that in a little bit. And speaking of highs, Lars, Washington's 2 offensive tackles are graded in the top 5 nationally by Pro Football Focus. What a remarkable turnaround for this offensive line through the first couple of weeks. But the big unfortunate news is that Rashid Williams is set to miss, as Jedd Fisch just said, several weeks with a collarbone injury, and they're deciding whether or not he's going to need surgery on that. So the question is, who will step up? And Jedd Fisch kind of answered that during his Monday press conference, where he let it slip that as of right now, Dezmen Roebuck is Washington's 3rd starting wide receiver.
It makes sense. And I know it's going to sound asinine to say you could start 2 true freshmen here in 2.5, 3 weeks when you host Ohio State, but you're kind of in that predicament. And when we both thought about this, if we would have had this discussion in late July, early August, panic button would already be hitting. They're probably 1-1. You drop probably the Colorado State game, and it just kind of compiled from there. But I truly think the way Desmond has showed through the first 2 games and what we saw from him in fall camp and what we know from inside the building, the coaches kind of have no choice but to play him. Like, he's giving them no reason to sit him on the bench. When you look at what happened this past weekend against UC Davis, that to me was the one that said, okay, you get your first career touchdown. You really just kind of look like the part of a college receiver, not by any means polished, you're not getting it from Jeremiah Smith or even Denzel Boston, but you know what you're going to get from him. You know he can do more than just a job for you. And I think the key for me is what we saw this past weekend was a bunch of guys getting targets, a bunch of guys getting 1, 2, 3 receptions, and just can you find a way to maybe cut that down, limit it, and focus on some guys? Because another name that hasn't been mentioned that did catch his first 2 passes was Justice Williams. Like, that's another guy, a big body to me, where if we're talking about a 3rd receiver, if you want to compliment somebody that's a little taller than Desmond, those 2 guys right there, Braden and a few others, like, you have enough pieces to make it work. I know it's not ideal, but I think the talent will show through.
So the biggest thing that you said that I agree with is that Desmond has certainly given the coaching staff no reason but to play. That I absolutely agree with. I'm certainly a little wary of what this is going to look like against Ohio State and just how their secondary looks right now. Obviously, we can't overlook the Washington State game. I know we still have an extra week to get there with the bye and everything. But as I kind of look at where this team is right now, against Washington State, you can certainly get away with it a little bit more in terms of playing an extra true freshman. But the one guy who you didn't mention that needs to be factored into this equation is Omari Evans. This is why you went out and got a player like that. And because you and I knew that even when Omari, like before he even got here, that these true freshmen were going to at least fight for spots in the rotation. We felt very early on that some of these guys were going to get on the field. I know you and I felt strongly about Chris Lawson, which is the name I actually thought you were going to say instead of Justice Williams, because with Justice, he's just more of that true X player. That's why you and I have been talking about 2026 as kind of the year to keep an eye out for him, because as Denzel Boston, when in all likelihood moves on to the NFL after this year, Justice can step into that role. And you still have so many other guys that can kind of just mix and match between those other 2 receiver spots, which is great. And, speaking of like Kevin Green, Audric Harris are guys that need to be factored into this equation as well. And they just give you a little bit more of a veteran option. I think Dezmen Roebuck has been tremendous through these first couple of weeks. It's been so much fun to watch him because he's doing everything he did in fall camp, where it's just finding ways to get open. He's really reliable with his hands. He can make plays in space, and it's awesome. And if he does earn a start against Washington State, Yes, by all means. He certainly earned it. I just think it's a very different beast when you go up against Ohio State. And this is a conversation that I was having with our good buddy Alex Katzen a little while ago after Jedd Fisch's press conference. And he pointed out something that certainly just adds to this equation as well. Omari Evans has played against Ohio State before. It's not this same Matt Patricia scheme that they're rolling out there, but that is something that also needs to be taken into account when you think just down the line and Big Ten experience and everything. Because yes, Raiden Vinesbright, Dezmen Roebuck, Chris Lawson, Justice Williams, these are the guys that are the future of this receiving core. But as we just kind of look at where this program is right now, I think that if you want to just still work him in very, very heavily, great, that's fine. You can find ways to do that. But this is why you went out and got Omari Evans, to give a little bit of an extra veteran presence to that room.
What's the best ability?
Availability, for sure.
And that's the problem. I have no disagreements about Omari. You know how high I was on him, the potential that he added with that veteran presence, but I'm looking at the PFF snap count right now, and I'm not seeing Omari Evans' name on that list. And, it goes without saying the Jets kind of hinted at, well, he's still working through an injury, still coming back, but it's like he's there but not there. And the first couple of weeks, and even honestly against Wazoo, from what we've seen in the first couple of games that they've had, you can probably roll out Desmond Roebuck and company with Denzel
but that's what I'm saying.
And figure that one out. But by the time you get to that Ohio State game, if Omari's not ready to go, I almost wonder if Desmond's going to benefit from that Wazoo start. Let's run with the theory that Desmond starts at Wazoo. Let's say he has another 6 for 85 game and maybe he has another touchdown. At that point, the potential of Omari doesn't outweigh the production of Desmond or anybody else that's in that position.
Sure.
Where, you like the veteran presence. And that's what Kevin Green is. In reality, that's kind of what you would lean on Kevin Green, where we saw him a little bit against UC Davis as well. That would be where I would go, because until Omari steps on the field and gives you a reason to say, hey, look at that nice catch he made. Look at the connection he has with Damon. Like, that's like, they clearly have chemistry there. So you just it was worth the wait. Well, that worth the wait only lasts until either Desmond takes a step back, or Omari usurps him in some way, shape, or form in the next 2.5 weeks.
So that's kind of where I'm going with this, though, is I feel like if let's say it wasn't UC Davis, let's say Washington was playing another Power 4 team, it wasn't the Apple Cup, it was just, some other Power 4 matchup, like Oregon played Oklahoma State. Let's run with that theory for a second. I think Omari Evans was good to go for this last game. And I feel the same way about Logan Sagapolu, because Jedd Fisch last week leading up to the game was, oh yeah, he's cleared to play. It seems like Omari is pretty close. They both practiced and everything. And then on Thursday, at least with Omari, it was, oh, no, he's not going to play this week. So from the way he talked about it being a soft tissue injury, giving him 2 extra weeks to recoup and recover, especially with a guy where speed is his number one asset. Giving him a couple extra weeks to recover is certainly not a bad thing. And it's, again, where it plays into, okay, yeah, you can roll him out there against Wazoo. Maybe Desmond still earns the start. And, again, with the way he's played over the first couple of weeks, coming off such a strong fall camp, he has 100% earned that. I couldn't agree with you more there. I think that it's one of those things where, especially as we kind of look down the stretch, Washington still hasn't won a road game. And that's something that you need to factor in here. Omari Evans has played in those environments before. Dezmen Roebuck hasn't. And that's not a knock, because he's still going to get that opportunity for sure. But it's just one of those things where, and I think the big thing there that I think we should realize before we move on is this is a good thing in the long run, not the Rashid Williams injury. Let's be clear about that, but it's good that we're able to have this discussion. It's not an, oh no, somebody needs to fill in that spot. Who's it going to be? It's no, we've seen all of these guys who we're bringing up here make plays before in one way or another. And my point here with being so hard on this Omari Evans side is we've seen him do that in the Big Ten against Big Ten competition, which is important. And Dezmen Roebuck, again, is going to get that opportunity. And I think he's going to make the most of it and be a tremendous player. He's looked so good over these first couple of weeks. It's hard not to say that at this point in time, especially coming off, again, such a strong fall camp. But I think it's one of those things where if you have the ability to lean on experience, at least throw him out there and see what that looks like. And then you can just kind of mix and match from there. Again, don't start him unnecessarily, but there's an opportunity, and I think this is what it's going to end up looking like at the end of the day, to get both of these guys on the field a lot and just kind of let everything play out on the field in terms of the best competition you can face, which is another opponent. And Lars, with that being said, this passing game doesn't work without the offensive line. And so far, this offensive line has been really, really good. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime-flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends, it's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. And for me, it's just a really nice boost. I like to go out to the driving range once or twice a week and just get some swings in. And sometimes I'm a little exhausted after a long day of writing and podcasting and everything else like that. So having some 5 Hour Energy is such a nice boost for me. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. This grape, ginger, lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5-h-e-win.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays, not when you need that when watching Michael Penix. I know the Falcons let him down, but he looked tremendous, and I'm still certainly riding the Falcons as the NFC South winners this year. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. I want to get out ahead of some of the comments I know we're going to get about this. We are very well aware that Washington has played a G5 school in Colorado State and an FCS opponent in UC Davis so far. But they can only play who's in front of them. And this is where I want to go with this, because with that being said, Washington has two of the top 5 graded tackles in the nation right now, according to PFF. That's number 1, Carver Willis with an 86.4, and Drew Azzopardi at number 4 with an 85.5. And I'm going to just give you a couple of numbers here that I was doing some research for when I was writing an article over on Huskies Wire. So far this season, Washington has let up 3 sacks and 6 tackles for loss. And now all of those sacks and 5 of those 6 TFLs came against Colorado State, who blitzed Dezmen Williams at over 70% clip, by the way. So I feel like that's something that needs to be taken into account when considering those numbers, especially when you look at PFF and none of those 3 sacks are credited to offensive linemen. It just means that they just sent an overwhelming blitz. And on a couple of them, there were miscommunications on pass protection from running backs and tight ends and things like that, which is kind of where at least 2 of those sacks came from. I know Dezmen held on to the ball too long on one of those as well. And comparing that to last season, through the first 2 games, which again, G5 school and an FCS school in Weber State and Eastern Michigan, Washington and that patchwork offensive line had let up just 2 sacks, so lesser number there, but 11 TFLs. So I think that's something to note here. And shout out to Carver and Drew. They have been really, really good.
I think it's more of a testament to the overall takeaway is Carver Willis can be a left tackle at the Power 4 level. I think that is without question. Where he played right tackle for the past couple of years at K-State. That was going to be the question. Could he make that transition legitimately, not just in practice, not just for a couple of weeks? And we thought he looked pretty good in fall camp and spring, the transition that he was making. I do think it's worth a shout out to kind of something I've also been saying throughout since the promotion was made, Michael Switzer's ability to focus on technique. I think that, and there's no slight to Brennan Carroll. We both love Brennan Carroll. BC is a great guy, great coach. But I think the focus on technique and, kind of the nuances of the offensive line position for both tackles, and you could even expand this to Landon at center in the 2 guards. I think the overall offensive line, but certainly Carver and Drew, have benefited from Michael Switzer, whereas, the assistant line coach, Mike Brewster, more focused on the interior guys. So really, that's why I want to highlight Switzer with this, because he was basically tasked with make sure Carver Willis can be a Power 4 left tackle and get Drew Azzopardi back, to where he should belong, especially with his size. And again, it's UC Davis and Colorado State, But Drew's just looked like a mauler, and so you just have to hope that against Wazoo that holds up. And then if it doesn't hold up so much so against Ohio State, but still looks, in the PFF 80 range, where if he's at 82 or 81 compared to his 86, 87 that he's been at, that's okay. You're good with that. You just don't want that massive fall off from where he's at to those low 70s, high 60s grades, which means probably Ohio State won by 2 touchdowns and you gave up 7 sacks.
So as I remember just browsing the interwebs, scrolling the Twitter machine and everything from the end of last season until now, I don't think that there was a more scrutinized player that I saw than Azzopardi. And I thought that it was very, very telling for how Jedd Fisch's coaching staff, Michael Switzer obviously included in all this. Honestly, I thought you were going to start all that by just saying, yeah, shout out to Michael Switzer, because that's where I wanted to go if you didn't. And I look at Drew, and it was just so clear that this coaching staff had so much faith and so much trust in him. And Jedd Fisch mentioned it at the press conference today, saying, yeah, it was his first full season as a starter in college football. And, having to be tasked with what he was on that offensive line last year after starting 4 or 5 games at San Diego State in 2023, it was going to be a little bit difficult. And I know they'd hoped to get him more help. And unfortunately, partially due to the circumstance, they just weren't able to. And so I look at what Drew has been able to do so far this season, and it looks so much better. And one of the things that I know Jedd Fisch talked about a little while back is they asked him to just change up his body and do more yoga and get more flexible while working on technique and all those other things. And I think that's paid off in a big way. You can just see it in his lateral movement that he certainly just looks a lot better. I like to go back and highlight Jonah Coleman's first touchdown run against Colorado State in week 1. He got out in the open field and he was moving. It's something where those are the things that, and again, this is all what Jedd Fisch was talking about today in his press conference as well, was they weren't able to do some of the things that they were even against, again, Weber State and Eastern Michigan last year, this season, because of the offensive line, because it just wasn't what it was right now and is just so much more of a strength for you. And they're able to impose their will on the ground. They had 14 touchdowns on the ground all of last year. They have 12 this year. These are really, really important things to consider here. And as I just kind of look at what this offense is going to be moving forward, I feel like we've talked about this for years, because I know Kalen DeBoer liked to say this back in the day too, that, oh yeah, it's a balanced offense. No, this is what a balanced offense looks like. It's you can establish the run, and then when you need to throw off of that, you can do that too. But also if you need Dezmen Williams to drop back and throw 30, 35 times, you can do that. And no matter what it's going to look like, I feel like Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff are just so much more confident in what this offensive line is. And it starts with those guys on the outside.
As you were saying and making all those great points, the reason why I started smiling was because it validated the theory that 2021 could have been. If you run the dang ball with the right guys and the right offensive line and the right coordinator and the right play caller and the right everything, it works fantastic. When you have a good
is a very important part there. Yeah.
All those points need to be stated because they're absolutely right. The offensive coordinator is certainly a role in that. But we're noting you can run the ball. You can be that, true balance, but lead with the rushing attack, set the tone with the run, have the quarterback do what he needs to do. But it all starts with the offensive line. And in 21, you had the big bodies. And to your point, now, at 6'7", 315, Drew Azzopardi is a big guy, but he's way more athletic than you would normally think if you just saw 6'7", 315. And last season, to your point, he was the Carver Willis edition. He was the most veteran transfer, unless you count Max McCree's JUCO time, because 2 games at Maryland before his family situation doesn't really kind of hang up in comparison. So the fact that Drew was the most veteran starter kind of really does stick with me. And I was one of those too that was really hard on him. And now looking back, this is partially why, just because I knew with that size he could be as good as he is. I just hope he continues to ascend and hold up, because there's no reason for him not to.
No, absolutely. And as you said that, it kind of hit me that he started more games at Mountain West San Diego State than Enoch Vimahai did at Ohio State. So that's certainly something that needs to be thrown out there. But no, you're right. And it's just something where the more I think about what this season can be going forward, if they are to hit, I had them at 9 wins for the year. You had them at 10. If they're going to hit 8, 9, 10 wins, just somewhere in that ballpark, it's all going to start on the offensive line, because this just goes back to, again, a conversation we were having after the press conference, where when you went on the road last season, kind of why I mentioned the road a little bit earlier too. When you run on the road, you couldn't do anything when it came to running the ball at different points in time. You look at just different points at Penn State, at Oregon, at, even at Iowa for a little while. I know Jonah ripped off a couple long runs there and had, I think it was 9 carries for 81 yards, but you look at that game as a whole and you look at a lot of these road games, you weren't able to establish your will on the ground. You weren't able to do any of that. And now as we look at the differences in this offensive line, and shout out to the guys on the interior as well, John Mills has been really good. I was going to say Carver Willis again. Landon Hatchett, Garen Hatchett. They've been really good. Pocky Finau has been more than solid as well. You look at what this offensive line is, it's just such a major switch from where you were last season. And as this continues to move forward, I'm really excited to see what Michael Switzer can do with this unit, especially because you look at what's coming down the pipeline and how Cody Green can add to this, even as a true freshman, because it sounds like he's going to. As much as some people might disagree with that, Cody Green will be in this mix in some way, shape, or form in 2026. So I just look at where this offensive line is going, and it's all a really exciting thought. And it's, again, starts with these guys on the outside, because if Dezmen Williams has time in the pocket and he's got 2 tackles that he knows he can trust, things are going to look so much different along this offensive line for the rest of the season. But Lars, we've talked a lot about the offense. Let's switch sides of the ball. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can pull up Game Time and in just a couple of taps find amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. The app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from your seat before buying. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Lars, as you look at the defensive side of the ball here, what letter grade would you give them over the first 2 weeks?
I mean, it's been passable, so certainly above a C. I don't think it's been flawless, so not a B or higher, but I think somewhere between a B and a C. I'll give it a solid B minus for this reason. As I was telling you before the show, the one area where Washington needed to really improve, and really seemingly seems to improve, needs to improve every year on defense, is with missed tackles. They are sitting, I think, 5th or 6th, just behind Oregon with 10 missed tackles through the first 2 games. I know it sounds like a lot. And it's like, wow, 10 missed tackles. You're talking basically, 5 per game in that sense. Sounds a lot. Sounds pretty bad. But when you look at, and I'm going to pull up some numbers here. I know Minnesota has the fewest with 3, but you're talking about Penn State, some of these others that are worse than Washington in that regard. And that to me kind of speaks volumes, where you look at it and think how much of, this defense can still improve. So I'll give you kind of some numbers to, bear it out here. Penn State has 15. Ohio State has 18 missed tackles. Not missed tackles forced on offense. We're talking defensive missed tackles, so already better than Washington. So Washington's already in a better position just right there when you're talking about that September 27th matchup. Obviously, again, who's Ohio State played, who's Washington played. Yeah, there's some
I was going to say
differences.
The Texas game in there does look more.
But yeah, I get it. Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. But even with the Sark-esque game there, you still have to. 18 is a lot in 2 games. That's significant. And I think when you look at the talent that Washington has, that bodes pretty well for you. But at least one area for me, and ironically, the guy at the bottom of the list with 1 missed tackle on his name is Tariq Budalukta coming into the Apple Cup, which ironically was while he's, kind of the fans were complaining about him having a bunch of missed tackles, which rightfully so he did. But I think it's proven that was a scheme more so than player issue. So I think overall, there's a positive light with Tacario's interception this past weekend, but you still need to see some improvements on the defense kind of holistically.
No, absolutely. Where you have him at a B minus, I'll go a little bit lower because that was kind of right in the range that I want to give him to. I'll give it a C plus, and I almost feel like an incomplete is the best way to put it, because quality of opponent is certainly one thing. Where A couple of the numbers that I have here. Washington is 6th in the Big Ten in yardage allowed. It's 241.5. They're 13th in points at 15.5, where being 13, that's whole other discussion where when Ryan Walters' defense led the nation a few years ago, it was like 12 points per game. So just an interesting note there, where it also just kind of speaks to quality of opponent when Minnesota is beaten up on Northwestern State 66-0, and they call that game halfway through the fourth quarter. So just a whole bunch of caveats certainly need to be thrown in regards to those numbers. And, if you really want to continue to caveat it there, which I hate that I'm doing this, but it all is certainly worth mentioning. I still think Colorado State scores on that possession, but they did score a touchdown out of an illegal formation, which is something that the whole coaching staff was certainly very frustrated by and made it known during various press conferences. But I think that as we kind of continue to move forward here, I think that we're going to see a lot more from this defense as Logan, Sagapolu, and Deshawn Lynch seem to be ready to return for the Apple Cup. And you look at the cornerbacks. I'm fully confident what Tacario Davis brings to the table, where I don't think his injury is anything to worry about, where you're up 28-3 by the end of the possession following the pick. There's no reason to put him back in that game if he's even just like a little hobbled by what was going on following that interception, which also just showed tremendous recovery speed and why he should be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. But I just continue to look forward. And I think that some of the matchups that Washington has, if this defensive line can find a way to generate pressure, which they did a good job of against an inferior opponent in UC Davis, where you get 3 sacks and you really made the quarterback panic on so many of his dropbacks. If you can find a way to do that consistently against Big Ten quality teams, there's no reason that this shouldn't be a top half of the conference defense at the very worst.
No, I agree with that assessment. I do think it's kind of funny to look at PFF defensive grades. And if I gave you 2 guesses as to who has the highest coverage grade of any UW defender, who are your first 2 guesses?
Ooh, so one of the ones, since I know you're setting me up for something here, I'm going to guess Zach Durfee for one, and I'm just going to guess Alex McLaughlin is the other.
So you had the right principle with the first one. It's the other one on the opposite side. It's Jacob Lane.
Oh, really?
McLaughlin is up there as well. But Jacob Lane, and the funniest part is I'm going to give it to you. It's 86.2 for his coverage grade. Again, take that with what's real. But McLaughlin is second, but he's at 74.0. So there's a significant gap. Now, again, 2 weeks, semantics, grades, all those. But it kind of just
also a matter of snap count, too.
Exactly. And I think it's an interesting thing about where those snaps are going, but it does speak to the potential of the defensive line to where if Durfee is that guy adding pressure, Jacob can be the guy that kind of drops back and plays that 0. There's a number of different kind of things you can work off of that. But to me, we saw Jacob get in the backfield pretty early on against UC Davis. It's got to be more than Zach and Jacob, though. That's kind of what it boils down to. And we both believe that it will be. But I just think seeing that against Wazoo, where you're kind of a perfect opportunity for you to take advantage of, whether it's Jackson Potter, shout out one-time UW commit, or, Zevi Ekas, whoever ends up being quarterback over there at this point in the running game, this is an opportunity for you to kind of assert your will along the defensive line and say, you know what, we're going to add 4 or 5 tackles for loss to our resume. We're going to add 2 or 3 more sacks, because you have to be timely with it. And one thing of note, speaking to kind of the positive trending up with this defense, number 2 in tackle grade, Ryland Dillard Allen. Again, snap count still a thing here, but I think when you look at the pieces that are in place, both at starter and kind of in that backup emerging role, everything's there for Washington's defense to get better.
No, absolutely. And I that's why I wanted to highlight Logan Sagapolu and Deshawn Lynch, just continuing to add to this edge rusher, not just edge rusher, just defensive line as a whole, because Isaiah Ward did have that 3rd sack against UC Davis as well. So you were finding a way to get pressure from the outside, which is great. And I think that, Anterio Thompson coming into that last game is questionable. It didn't seem to impact his snap count very much, where Washington had 5 guys play 15 plus snaps, including Armand Parker. Shout out to him, by the way, for getting on the field for the first time in his UW career. That was awesome. But I look at where this defensive line can be, and you add just another guy who's going to command so much attention in the middle of the line in Sagapolu. All of a sudden, if you're, rushing 5 plus getting a double team from Logan on whichever guard wants to help out the center on a play like that, you are going to find a way to get pressure, or you're going to have some kind of coverage on the back end that's going to work, because, again, with the way Ryan Walters likes to play man coverage, if you can just continue to hold on, and these corners who have been really, really solid so far on the outside this season can just continue to do what they have been doing, again, against a higher quality of opponent, that's really important. And the sacks and these tackles for losses, they are going to come at some point in some way, shape, or form. When that might be is beyond me. But as you said, it would be a really nice time to start that against Washington State and just give you that momentum going forward into Big Ten play. And that's why I think that these guys did get held out for another week against UC Davis. Like, yeah, giving them that opportunity to play and just get some snaps under their belt is a very nice experience. But at the same point, if you do that and then you have the bye week, it might, just kind of not be as beneficial as to bringing them back and then just getting them in the full regular flow of, okay, now we don't have a bye until the beginning of November. So you have 6-7 weeks in a row to make sure you're, game prepping and everything, and what's coming down the line as well.
I think to tie all this together, because going back to the receivers, as you were making that point, it made me think of, well, why not give these guys the opportunity in games that you should win with or without the starters and guys that, the Anterio Thompsons of the world. Like, you should be able to beat UC Davis and Colorado State with or without Anterio. That's not a slight to Anterio. Sure. Just you have enough horses on that D-line with the depth we talked about. You can get by with that. And then when you get to the Wazoo and Ohio State game, you have your starters in Anterio and the guys that you can count on. Plus, you've seen what the freshmen and younger guys can do, so you know what they can actually bring to the table versus, hey, we're going to throw you out there against Ohio State. Desmond, good luck in your first appearance. And, same thing with some of the young guys on the defensive line. All that kind of bodes to say, whichever pieces happen to shine brightest, you have the entire puzzle to work with.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new video. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.